Hi guys, I thought I'd make a quick video today as I'm doing a little bit of meal prep. I'm getting food ready. I have to teach tonight and I'm packing my food for the day. And I just thought I would record what I was doing. I'm making this new waffle recipe that I love that are high fiber, high protein waffles, and they're actually delicious, pretty easy to make. And then one of my favorite quick meal preps that's a slaw with any kind of protein. I'm going to do chicken today. And I thought I'd just talk about how I meal prep, why I meal prep the way I do, and meal prepping for macros, because I am a huge fan of counting macros. I always have been, and it kind of ties into the way that I do everything. So I'm just gonna prep along and try to fill you in on stuff. I'll put all these recipes up afterwards, so if you don't catch it as I'm doing it, not a big deal, you'll be able to get it. Or you can shoot me a message. So first I'm just gonna do these waffles. So one of the first things that I do when I meal prep that I always do is I weigh everything. I weigh everything for counting macros. I weigh everything for all my recipes. I don't generally use measuring cups. And that comes a lot from being a chef because it's much more accurate. With a measuring cup, whether it's packed or it's loosely packed, affects how much you have of whatever ingredient is, so it can affect a recipe, but it also affects your macros. If you tightly pack a cup or loosely pack a cup, you're not getting the same amount. And I'm a numbers geek, so I like to know that I have total control over all of it. Yeah, I'm a little bit of a control freak, a little type A. I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, which also makes me want to mention counting macros. I think a lot of people worry about counting macros because they worry about hitting the numbers exactly. But again, if you're measuring everything and counting macros, even if you're not perfect, you're still probably more accurate than you are doing portion sizes, because portion sizes depends how you pack the cup that day, depends on all these other factors, and macros is so much more accurate that even when you're not perfect, you're probably still more accurate. So that's one of the other reasons that I love it. So first thing I'm measuring out for these waffles is I'm going to do 100 grams of oat bran. And oat bran compared to oatmeal has more fiber, it has a little more fat, and more protein. So it gets you more protein and fat and a little less carbs. And again, with counting macros, I personally, totally personal preference, but I like to get the majority of my carbohydrates from fruits and vegetables. One, because I know I'm getting a lot of good micronutrients, but honestly, just because I like to eat food and it gives me a greater variety of flavors and textures and a greater volume of food, because the same number of grams of carbohydrate in 4 cups of cabbage is a little teeny tiny serving of rice or oats or sweet potato. And I'd rather have the volume and the flavor by using a lot of fruits and vegetables. So when I do use grain, I'm careful about what choices I make. For example, using oat bran instead of oatmeal. So on my oat bran, everything goes in the blender for this recipe. It's awesome. I like to put the oat bran in the blender and all the dry stuff and blend it up first because it makes it a little finer, more like a flour, and it just gives a nice texture in the end. The next thing I have is flaxseed meal, which is ground flax seeds. If you don't have ground flax seeds, you can just use regular flax seeds and grind your own. And I'm going to use 20 grams of those. These help with texture. They also are little nutrition powerhouses. And then next I'm going to add my protein powder. And I'm using vanilla whey today. You could use any flavored whey protein you want, but make sure it's a whey protein powder that is mostly whey without added carbs. Like this only has 3 grams of carbs. This is straight protein. I'm adding to these 2 waffles for my protein. And I'm adding in 35 grams, which is going to give me a protein powder, which will give me 25 grams of carbs to my recipe. Protein to my recipe. Don't mind my dogs. Alright, and then I need my baking powder, which is 1 tablespoon, which seems like a lot, but that's what helps. These waffles have the best texture. They're like super light and crispy. You can actually bake them as pancakes too. If you used an unflavored protein powder, you could add some herbs and garlic and things to the batter. And instead of making them sweet, you could make them savory and use them to top them with chicken, protein, taco stuff, whatever, to make a savory meal out of it. Oh my gosh, my dogs are gonna drive me nuts. Then I'm gonna just add a little bit of cinnamon. in the recipe it's like a half teaspoon, but that's one thing I don't measure. That's not going to affect my macros. I'm going to throw this stuff on and buzz it all. I'm going to shake it first, and I'm going to buzz it just to make the oat bran a little bit finer. Not a necessary step, but I like the results better. I use a magic bullet. Sometimes I'll use my Vitamix, but this is just so easy. It's small, it's easy to take it out, clean it, put it away. Is it me, or is it like every video you ever watch of people, their dogs decide to bark right when you decide to start filming? They haven't been barking all morning. They're just doing it now. Okay, so next I'm going to do my wet ingredients. I don't know if you've noticed, but another important thing that I do that comes to me from being a chef is I'm not weighing everything directly into here. I weigh each ingredient separate and then add it in, and that's in case I make a mistake and so I can double check myself, because if I'm adding them all together and I do make a mistake, it's really hard to pull out what you put in there that you didn't want there. So next up, I'm going to add 1 whole egg and 2 egg whites, which is 2 ounces of egg white, and you can use, you know, the pre-cracked whites if that's what you do, that's what you have in your house, that's what you like. I'm just going to separate them. Oh, that one didn't work, so there's my whole egg. It was slippery. A little trick when you crack eggs, it's actually safer and easier to crack eggs on a flat counter than on an edge, because the shell doesn't go into it, it cracks it so you can pull it apart. But if you crack it on the edge of something, it goes into it. For food safety reasons, that's actually not the smartest way to do it. As I dump the yolk right in there. See, professionals make mistakes too. Making a mess today. Okay, good thing I didn't need that yolk. So there's my egg, and I'm just gonna add that to the blender. Probably not gonna fit everything in this little blender. And I'm gonna blend this up again a little bit in that way that if I need to take a little bit of this out because it doesn't fit, I know it's mixed really well. There, I think it's just gonna fit. I should know this. I just made these yesterday. Oh yeah, totally gonna fit. So now I'm going to add half a cup of almond milk. I like this happens to be my favorite one right now. If you prefer one that doesn't have any added, like this has some gum added to guar gum and carrageenan and things like that, like this one doesn't have carrageenan, but some of them have added seaweed and things to help with the texture. If you want a straight up, just use your favorite almond milk. I prefer almond or almond cashew or straight cashew. Cashew milk to me tastes the most like milk and is the creamiest. I like this one because it tastes awesome and it's 25 calories for 8 ounces. So again, it's great as far as my macros go. So I'm doing 4 ounces of milk because that's a half a cup. I also think once you get used to using a scale, it's faster. You just dump everything on, you weigh it, and you dump it into what you're doing. Blend this up again. I'm going to add my vanilla to it. It's a teaspoon of vanilla. You could use any flavor you wanted. If you have another flavor extract, maple or something would actually be delicious. Depending on what you're going to use your waffles for. I made breakfast sandwiches with these waffles the other day, and it was delicious with egg whites and turkey bacon. All right, blend this bad boy up. I can tell I have some dry stuff at the bottom, so I'm just gonna mix. I could mix it in the bowl afterwards, but get it all mixed up. So the last thing that goes into this recipe is club soda or seltzer water. And I'm just using plain because that's what I have. But if you have like liqueur, like if you like the seltzer waters and you drink them and you have flavored ones hanging around your house, use a flavored one. I had some like cherry or something hanging around the other day when I made these and it was delicious. It just puts a little more flavor into them. No rules. Alright. So I'm going to just add all this together now. I'm going to dump my batter out that I mixed. If you were doing this in a bigger blender, you don't need to blend it on the blender when you add the seltzer, but you could just leave in that container so you're making less dishes. I'm all about less dishes, less stuff to clean up after I prep. These hold so you can make a big batch. This recipe makes 4, but you could make a big batch in a bigger blender, make them for the week. You can freeze them. You can play around with different flavors of protein powder, chocolate protein powder, whatever, when you're making them. If you use a protein powder that is not just whey protein, a plant protein powder, it may affect the texture a little bit differently, and obviously it's going to affect your macros, your nutrition, so you just want to remember that. So now I'm going to add 4 ounces of club soda or seltzer water, which is a half a cup. This helps make them like really light and airy and crispy on the outside. They're really so good. This is one of the recipes I'm most excited about, new recipe that I just started making. So it gets all like foamed up and kind of crazy, and that's from the baking powder reacting with the seltzer water. Just mix it all together. The batter seems a little bit watery, so I usually let it sit for a couple minutes while the waffle iron or your saute pan, if you're making little pancakes, heats up. And it will start to thicken from the flax meal. Actually, will start to get thick. You can actually use, some people use flax meal as an egg replacer because it gets kind of like chia. It gets a little gel-like after it sits with liquid. Alright, so that's all mixed together. It's good just like that, but that's because I love that protein powder. So then I like to use to spray my waffle iron, my pans, my saute pans. You can use any kind of spray you want, but you can really buy any little pump squeeze bottle. I bought this one, honestly, just for the bottle. So it was on sale and it was like Pam coconut cooking spray. I bought it after I finished using it. Now I just keep refilling it. I use MCT oil, which are, maybe I'll do a post about that. MCT are medium chain triglycerides, which is a healthy fat for all kinds of different reasons. And so I like to use MCTs to cook with. It is expensive, but when you're just spraying it on, you're not using a lot anyway. So I keep refilling this, and that's what I use. You could also use canola oil. Sometimes I'll use avocado oil. That's another one of my favorite ones to cook with is avocado oil. That's a healthy fat, or olive oil, depending on if you want flavor. But like with sweet waffles, olive oil might give you kind of a weird flavor, but this is great. So I'm just going to spray. My waffle iron's ready, and that's been sitting. I'm going to spray it just so they don't stick. For some reason, last time I made this, one side of my waffle iron wants to stick, so that could happen. That's my disclaimer. And then it makes 4, which is basically a little over 4 ounces per waffle, which normally would be a half a cup, but if you were measuring just like water or regular liquid, but this is different because it has all the stuff in it. I'm gonna eyeball, it's a little bit more than a half a cup. I'm using a full cup measure. The first time I made them, because I wanted to get the nutrition right, when I entered it into my recipe software so I would know what the macros on it were, I put this on the scale and weighed out 4.5 ounces, which, well, I guess I'll just show you. I'll do it right now. And I weighed out 4.5 ounces. If you don't want to take that much time and you're not being super critical about every last gram as far as counting your macros, then you can, eyeball it and know you get 4 waffles out of it, and they're going to be approximately all the same as far as nutrition goes. But again, I think people have this idea that the weighing and measuring takes so much time, and when you're putting it on the scale, it really doesn't. It's an extra, it's an extra 2 seconds for me to put this down and pour into it compared to scooping out of it. How much more time is this taking me? It's not. And now I know that it's really accurate. I'm not guessing. So to that end, I keep my scale on my counter. This is a little kitchen scale, goes up to 11 pounds. Again, from being a chef, I'm so used to weighing and measuring things. That's how I do everything. It's how I cook, because technically, especially baking, it's much more accurate and you're much better when you weigh everything. So for me, I've never seen it as something that takes any amount of time or is an issue. I actually think it saves me time. I keep my scale on the counter, and as you'll see as I do the rest of my prep, it's not any different than putting it in a measuring cup and dumping it in, or just grabbing a handful and dumping it in. I put my plate or my container on your scale, and if you have a good scale, there's a 0 button or a tare button, and you zero out between each ingredient, and I just add the components to my meal to it as I do each container, and I know what I've got. Another thing that I do when I meal prep is, I used to meal prep like a lot of people. I would decide what I was making for the week, and I would fill all the containers, and my fridge was all nice and neat with all these stacks of different meals. And I got bored. My family got bored when I would do it for the kids too. And so I started bulk meal prepping, which is really basically what restaurants do. So I prep a whole bunch of vegetables, raw vegetables that I know I can use for different things ahead of time, or cooked vegetables. I'll prep a whole bunch of protein pasta, cooked and plain. I'll prep rice. I'll prep a whole bunch of chicken breast. I like to do sous vide, which I'll do a video on next week, because I think that's one of the greatest cooking hacks and meal prep hacks there is, because it makes the best, most tender, perfect chicken every time that then you can reheat or do other things to. So I bulk prep all those ingredients, and then sometimes I'll do a couple days worth of meals ahead if I have a really busy week. But otherwise, my scale's on the counter. I have all these things to choose from. So when I'm getting ready to, leave in the morning or the night before, I grab my containers and go, yeah, I think today I want a salad with this, 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 and this. I put my thing on the scale, and I just add my stuff to it, and I know what I have. Enter it in. I use my FitnessPal to track. I enter it in, and I know exactly what I have for the day, and it really doesn't take any longer. But it gives you so many options. And same thing for like cooking dinner. I already have a whole bunch of vegetables. Do I want to saute them? And am I having veggies for dinner as a stir fry, or I'm adding to pasta, or am I making some other sort of dish? But I have all these things to choose from, and depending on what sauce I add or how I cook it, I have so many different options for meals, and you're not eating the same thing every day, which is why a lot of people get bored with meal prep. And this is just how I eat all the time. In contest, when I'm in contest prep, then just my macros change. So the amounts of things I'm eating change. And again, talking about macros, I personally do not understand meal plans. That is my super scientific, wanting to know everything kind of personality. Is I think everyone, if you're a parent, a teacher, or a business owner with employees, you may understand this, but everyone tends to stick to things better, try to get better results, finish and follow through if they understand why they're doing something. Any kind of task or system or anything, if you understand the why behind it, you tend to be more successful. With macros, you can start to learn the why. You learn what your body responds to best. You understand, why am I eating 3 cups of this instead of 3 cups of this? Well, because that has more protein, and I need more protein because my body feels better when I'm eating less complex carbohydrates and more protein. Or maybe you're the other way around. But you can't figure those things out unless you're really tracking it and you know how much protein you're eating, how much fat you're eating, and how much carbohydrate you're eating. That's just the geek in me. I have basically been into macros. It's been around so much longer than most people think. It's like this new concept, but something called the zone diet, which some of you guys probably have heard of and remember from back like in the 90s. The zone diet was basically macros. It's 40-30-30, which is still how I eat most of the time, pretty close to 40-30-30, which is traditionally it was 40% carbs, 30% protein, 30% fat. I'll play with that when Coach Jen does my macros for competition. She'll play around with that depending on how she's seeing my body respond to things. But it's usually pretty close to that. So sometimes it's 40 protein, 30 carbs, and 30 fat. Sometimes it's 35, 35, 30. Sometimes it's, but it's all really pretty close to that. That's just what my body likes. Coincidentally, 40-30-30 is pretty close to eating a Mediterranean diet. Any of the diets that naturally the countries, the new Blue Zone book that just came out is probably going to be the big thing that's spreading, which again is very close to Mediterranean, is countries that are really heavily eat lots of fruits and vegetables and some whole grain and some animal protein, but a lot of your plate is fruit and vegetables. And when you count macros, you're able to you're counting the protein from your fruit and vegetables and the protein from your meat. So I eat meat, I always will, and fish, but again, counting macros lets me have a really much broader range of food. I eat the rainbow. It's really healthy because I'm also getting a good variety of micronutrients, which is, all your vitamins and minerals and enzymes and all those things. But it's really not a new concept. So for me, it just, has always made sense. I think if you're used to meal plans and I think what's intimidating for people is, well, I have no idea what 20 grams of protein is, so how do I figure out how to break it up through my meals? A couple things I would say, check out this waffle. I mean, come on. These are like the lightest, crispiest, most delicious. They're so crispy and light and beautiful. I don't know if you can see that, but you should make them. They're delicious. Now my mouth is full. What was I saying? Oh, so if you're used to meal plans and you want to get into macros, there's a couple things I would say. I think one way, if you're really nervous about not knowing how to figure out, other than having to plug every single thing and go back and forth and take all this time to learn it, you still do have to plug it in. But if you have some idea ahead of time in your head of roughly what's 20 grams of protein, you kind of know where to start. What I would say is if you're on a meal plan, start using MyFitnessPal or something similar and track your meal plan. If you can, depending on how it's written, if it's in cups, do it in cups. But if you really want to start to understand it, pack your cup or loosely pack your cup and weigh it and then enter it into MyFitnessPal based on the weight or the cups. I would do the weight if you're going to be weighing it anyway. One, you're going to learn a couple of things. You're going to start to see the difference between how you fill your cup and if it's always the same or not with your weight. But two, as you start to enter in, you're already comfortable with the measurements. You're comfortable with however it is you're eating. So keep eating the same way for right now. But start entering it in and learning what that comes out to. If you pay for MyFitnessPal Premium at the top of each meal and for your day, it will tell you your grams of carbohydrate, protein, and fat. It will also tell you your calories, which isn't always 100% accurate, but I'll get into that and then I'll do another video just about MyFitnessPal tips. So this way you start to understand, keep eating the way you're eating, but you can start to make a correlation between the size meals you're eating right now and how much protein, carbs, and fat is in them. So then when you transition and have your coach or whoever is doing your macros, or if you're doing it yourself, you'll automatically know, okay, I'm trying to hit this number a day. Well, that's pretty close to what I was hitting before, and this is what I was eating for a meal. And my meal before that was half a cup of this and, a quarter cup of that was this much protein, fat, and carbs. it'll be really easy for you to start to make the transition, because you'll start to be able to put the macro counts to the foods you're already eating and the portion sizes you're already eating. So then to just switch over to just basing it off the macros really shouldn't be that hard. I hope that made sense. It was kind of long and convoluted. I'm just going to weigh out another waffle to put in there as I keep going. Like, really, I cannot tell you guys how good these are. I'm going to put a little more spray because the last time I stuck. I always put it right in the middle, maybe the tiniest bit towards the front because of the way it squishes when it closes. Last one. One of my dogs is coming through the door. Okay, waffles done. All right, so I'm gonna let that last waffle cook, and I'm gonna show you guys a quick coleslaw that I like to make and kind of what I'm prepping for the rest of the day. All right. I have peppers I started chopping. So when I'm prepping, if I'm prepping for some, for that day or prepping ahead, whatever, like I said, I just will do all the vegetables, a whole bunch at once of everything, prep it. And whatever I don't use goes in the fridge, and then it's really easy to grab and go, mix and match, make whatever you want. Keep yourself from getting bored and sick of eating the same thing every day. For dressings and sauces, so this slaw is like a super, I call it a cheat. It's super fast, it's delicious, it's really filling, it's a volume. I started eating this last time I was competition training because it feels like a lot of food, it fills you up. Because cabbage, the majority of the carbohydrate in cabbage is fiber. So fiber fills you up, and I'm not really big on the whole like net carbs thing, whatever, but basically it's net zero for carbs. So for like people that are keto or whatever else, because the carbs are all fiber. And it's delicious. You can also do it with Brussels sprouts. So the reason that this one's kind of a cheat is because I use, a lot of the time, my favorite pre-made dressings and sauces are G. Hughes, which I discovered this year. And as a chef, I make a lot of my own a lot of the time, but I'm human, and sometimes if you find a good cheat, it saves time and adds to my variety. So this is their honey mustard dipping sauce, but it makes a great slaw dressing. And it has sucralose in it, so depending on if you use any alternative sweeteners and your feelings on them, the only ones that I use is I will a little bit of sucralose in things like this, and only in things that I'm using small quantities of, and only a little bit. And then stevia, I don't have a problem with. That's from a plant. It's like a mint leaf. If you eat the leaf itself, it's super, super sweet, and that's all that is, so it's natural. It has a little bit of an herbally taste, so depending on what I'm cooking with, what I'm using, I don't use a lot of stevia. And then the other one is monk fruit, which again is natural and from a fruit. So a little bit of erythritol doesn't bother me. Sugar alcohols bother different people. Erythritol is the only one that I really will use, because a lot of times it's with monk fruit, and the way it's made is an all-natural process through fermentation. So it's not some like chemically created in a lab chemical. It's a natural process of fermentation. And then I use coconut sugar, maple syrup, and honey, all in small quantities as sweeteners as well. So I kind of just got into that because all the G-Hughes sauces have a little bit of sucralose in them. If you don't want to use something like this slaw is also awesome with my sweet onion dressing, which was actually the house dressing. It's sweet, and I have a healthy version of that on my website with a couple other vinaigrettes. I like this slaw as a vinaigrette, but you could do it with a creamy, like, yogurt-based dressing as well, and I also have a recipe for that on my website. So I'm just going to start by shredding up my cabbage. This is Savoy cabbage. I just happen to like it. You can use any kind of cabbage you want. Buy pre-shredded cabbage if you want. You can shred it with a food processor. You can shred it on a grater. I'm just doing it with a really sharp knife. I like it really fine. You could cut it chunky or whatever, but with cabbage, when it's really fine, I like the way the dressing sticks to it. So I'm just gonna shred all this up, and then actually we'll do a little experiment with the scale as far as volume versus weight goes too, when I go to pack it up. So this is simple. I mean, I'm keeping this one pretty simple today. I normally would add a little bit of carrot to it. I ran out of carrots, so that's not happening today. I'm just gonna use some red pepper. I love red peppers. I use them a lot. Mixed in with my green vegetables or whatever, just because they add sweetness and so much flavor. And I'll add a tiny bit of red onion, but you really could put anything that you want to in this. I just do it so the majority of what I'm using is the cabbage. If you have something like this, you make it all the time, and you always use the same amounts and ratios of stuff. If you have my Fitness Pal Premium, you can create recipes in there, so you can add in, I did, you know, this many ounces, grams, cups of this, and then of each ingredient, and come up with, you know, like 2 servings. It's not quite as accurate if you're doing a lot of servings, because every scoop you might not have the exact ratio of, you know, each ingredient you put in it. If you have it separate, like the way I'm doing it today is I'm just going to have these ingredients separate. I'm going to weigh them into my containers for packaging them up, and then pour the dressing over it, so I'll know exactly how much cabbage and onion and red pepper I have in each one. And I'm doing that for a couple reasons. One, like when I meal prep for competition, that's how I do it, because that's the most accurate. But I'm also just doing it so I can show you guys how to do it that way, and that it really doesn't take that much time. It's not some big involved thing. Better not forget those waffles. I actually made a similar version of this slaw for all the girls that were with me and Coach Jen when we went to High Rocks in New York. On that one, I did shredded Brussels sprouts, and I added pomegranate seeds and toasted sunflower seeds to it, and a little bit of shredded apple. The shredded apple obviously is going to up your sugar carbs a little bit, but this is so low anyway, and there's nothing wrong with carbs. They're good, they're great. It's just you decide where you want to have them, you know, in your day and in your meal. So knowing what's in there is important. See, one had to stick. Knew it. One didn't stick. I just got to get this last waffle out. Oh, come on. Guess I'm eating this one. Sorry, as you watch my back, this is kind of boring, but I am just trying to get this thing unstuck. I don't know why that last one decided to stick itself. There we go. Turn that off. Done. Back to the slaw. So like on a day like today, what does my food look like for a day? This morning I had 2 pieces of gluten-free multigrain bread. Breakfast a lot of time is where I will choose to have bread or oatmeal or something like that. A little bit more carbs, sometimes depending on when I'm going to be working out or whatever, but I'm totally a breakfast person and I like to eat that stuff earlier in the day. So this morning I had 2 pieces of multigrain gluten-free toast with a little bit of no sugar added strawberry preserves, and I had egg whites. Usually I'll do 3 egg whites and 1 whole egg, just to get the amount of protein that I'm trying to get in. And then a lot of times I'll add a little sprinkle of, I like Parmesan cheese, like the real thing, not the Kraft stuff with all the chemicals in it. A tablespoon or so, because it doesn't add that much fat or anything. There's nothing wrong with it. And again, when you count macros, you can make those kinds of decisions. You know, if it fits your macros doesn't mean eat a Pop-Tart. It means that if I'm getting most of my carbs from fruit and vegetables and I'm full and my meals are complete, I might have a little bit of extra carb left over. And I can use a tablespoon of maple syrup on something, or I can use a tablespoon of all fruit jam, and I'm counting it in to my macros. So my overall nutrition for the whole day, I'm still hitting the numbers I need to hit, but I'm getting to have a little bit more variety of flavor and taste and feel like I'm not really missing out at all. And you get better and better at it, the more you do it, obviously, like anything, and you start to figure out what you can have and what makes sense. I think it's also great because if you have a less than perfect meal, and we all do, nobody's perfect, as we talk about all the time, it's not the end of the world. It's one meal. Don't let it, make you jump off the boat and decide that, okay, the whole day is ruined, I'm going to eat whatever I want. It's one meal. It's not going to ruin anything. But even more so when it's macros, because if you enter it in and count it, you just adjust the rest of your meals and you still hit your numbers for the day. Did you hit them in the absolute most nutritious way? No. But if you still hit your numbers, you didn't derail your progress at all. So yay, move on. You had the piece of pizza or whatever it was, and it's okay. It fits in. Doesn't mean you should do it every day. It doesn't mean Pop-Tarts and donuts and pizza every day, but it means when you do, it's a lot easier to just say, okay, I get it, not beat yourself up over it, add it to your plan, and move on and go back to eating your healthy, delicious macros. I am working on creating, and I'm really going to do my best to get it done this weekend, a macro cheat sheet, and I'll put information up online about that. I'm kind of creating a bunch of things around that, but the cheat sheet is the first thing I'm going to create as part of it, and that will kind of give you at a glance what is 20 grams of protein, what is 20 grams of carbs, what is 10 grams of fat, somewhere in those ranges. Don't know the exact numbers, but just so at a glance, if you're not used to it, okay, 20 grams of carbs is 4 ounces of chicken, and I'm trying to get 125 for the day. So it will, make it easier for you to plan your meals out with some sort of a starting point. Me personally, I try to get, for most people, the ideal amount of protein in a meal is between 20 and 30 grams. Depending on how many meals you like to split your nutrition up over the day, your macros. I've always been a more small meals more frequently kind of person. It's how I feel the best. It's just how I like to eat. So I split mine between 5 or 6 meals, and with what I eat for calories, protein, fat, and carbs, that means that I'm basically shooting for anywhere between 20 and 30 grams of carbohydrate per meal, 15 to 25 grams of protein per meal, and roughly 10 grams of fat per meal. But I let the fat kind of work itself out. I'll get a little bit from added whatever oil I'm using to cook my MCTs, or avocado oil. I'll get it from that little sprinkling of cheese that I might put on something, what naturally small amount occurs in whatever proteins I'm eating. Again, if I'm having salmon, obviously there's more that day. And then I'll fill in my good fats with nut butters. I'm like the hugest fan of nut butter, especially Nuts and More, because or Hanks, because they're nut butters that have added protein, and so they have more protein and a little bit less fat. Carbs are about the same as other nut butters. And so I'll do those as like either just a tablespoon of nut butter, because I need to get my extra fat in, or I'll have it with some celery, or on a like rice puff or rice cake, or I like the multigrain Susie cakes, things like that. Mary's Gone crackers, or with an apple or banana if that's in my macros for the day. But so I'm going to try to create these sheets that kind of will give you that rough idea, and also separate out a little bit which vegetables tend to have a little more protein in them and which ones tend to have higher levels of carbohydrate in them, so they're bridging two nutrition categories at once, because then you can start to learn on combining. So if I'm having a lot of a super higher protein vegetable, I can have a little bit less of my meat or fish or eggs or yogurt or whatever I'm using to get my other protein at that meal. And I think it'll be really helpful, I hope. And like I said, I'm hoping to get that done in the next week. I've been working on it, so now I said it out loud, I really have to do it. So I have my cabbage, I have my red pepper there, I have a little bit of red onion, which I love. I'm going to slice super thin. A trick with red onion, if you don't like onion like that little sharp flavor, but you like a little bit of onion flavor, I don't know, it adds to everything, is after you slice your onion, rinse it under cold water, and it rinses off a little bit of that bitter kind of pungency. The other thing you can do is you can steam it in the microwave or on the stove, but you just put it with a little bit of water in a container in the microwave for a minute or two, depending on how much onion and how thin you sliced it, and then strain the water off, and it mellows the flavor out, but then you still get, the delicious onion flavor. So I'm just gonna rinse this. And onion, this is like a really small amount, is one of those things that a lot of times I might not, if I'm just adding a really small amount to a recipe, might not worry about keeping that separate and trying to know that I used, half an ounce of onion. I just add it to my red pepper. It's close enough. And when I weigh it, just count it as part of my red pepper weight. So I'm just going to do that right now for the sake of being easy. All right, I'm going to rinse out this cup measure so we can do our little cup versus weight thing. All right, got my containers. These are my little meal prep containers. I have a 6-pack fitness bag, which I love. If you don't have one or haven't seen them, if you work, if you need to take your food with you, check them out because they're awesome. It looks like a big giant work travel pocketbook bag, but hidden inside it, besides room to carry all my work stuff, there's a cooler hidden in the bottom of it that these containers fit, which is really awesome. So 70 grams of a cup of cabbage, according to MyFitnessPal, is 70 grams, which is, I gotta check, I don't remember, 17 calories, 2 grams of carbs, which is fiber, and a gram of protein. So if I have my scale on there and I zeroed it, and I'm just gonna take this way and add my cabbage. And that cup is 36 grams because I just put it in there. Now, if I pack it down, or if it's cooked, but even if we're just doing raw against raw, if I pack it in there, now suddenly my cup is not 36 grams, my cup is 60 grams. So again, that's just to demonstrate the difference between weighing things and using cups to measure things. If you're actually trying to follow a plan and you need to be in calorie deficit, or say you need to be in calorie surplus because you're trying to gain weight, if you're not weighing things, you're kind of a little bit up and down. In the long run, if you're consistent, consistency always beats everything. It probably works its way out. And the same goes with macros. If you're a little off one day or the other day, if you're consistently just doing it and eating the healthy whole foods and eating the same food groups and weighing and being roughly close, in the long run, the consistency will take care of it. But I really think that there's just absolutely no reason not to be weighing everything. It's just, again, it's faster and so much more accurate. So I'm going to zero this. So I do 4 cups would be 70 calories, 68 calories, something like that. And like 8 grams of carbohydrate. And it's so much food. This is 1. So 4 cups, by that I actually mean 280 grams, because I'll usually weigh it. So 280 grams of cabbage is what I would eat. It's also what I would eat for spaghetti squash. And the reason I'm showing you this is, again, because volume, because people worry about being full and hungry. And if you choose high volume foods, yeah, that is not an issue. I can't even fit this in my meal prep container. I'm at 115 right now of shredded cabbage. So 115 grams. So that's 140 calories right there. And it's, again, like 4 grams of carbohydrate, which means I have, and not because carbs are bad, again, but it means I'm filling up on other things, so I have more ways to use my carbs. So if there's a little bit of carbs in a little bit of maple syrup that makes me feel like I am not depriving myself, because I can put a little bit of maple syrup, and I measure it, in my coffee or drizzled on my plain yogurt, then I'm all about doing this. My other favorite sources of like starchy carbs are sweet potatoes, butternut squash, regular potatoes I like too. Sometimes I'll do rice, not that often. I do spaghetti squash a lot. That's lower in carbs, so again, high volume. Again, that's why I like the lower carb foods, because I can eat a lot. So if I'm allowed to have 20 grams of carbs at this meal, it literally means I could eat that entire head of cabbage. All of this could be one meal if I'm doing 20 grams of carbs at a meal. All of this plus this red pepper, and I might maybe hit 20 grams of carbs. That's a lot of food, and it tastes good, and you're not going to be feeling deprived. So for the sake of my meal prep containers, the other thing you can do if you're trying to get more in is for something like cabbage, it's going to wilt a little bit when you add your dressing. So I can put it all in the bowl first. Again, it takes away from, yes, being fast and just dumping it in here. But I can put it all in this bowl first and then put dressing on it. I mean, seriously, that's 140 grams. So that's technically would have been the 2 packed cups, which is, no, it's only 40 calories. Yeah, 17. All of that. And again, not because I'm trying to, not eat any carbs or anything. So that just added, again with the scale, like I forgot to have it on there. It doesn't matter because I had it zeroed out. I put it back on. It already took account for this weight. So now I know that I added 60 grams of red pepper. And then I'm just going to add my dressing on top. And same thing, I'm weighing that. 30 grams is 2 tablespoons. Coincidentally, that's also an ounce. There's 2 tablespoons of most liquids is an ounce. And that's it. Mix it all together. It's delicious. And now I'll put some chicken that I have previously cooked. So this is my chicken done sous vide, which is in the vacuum sealed, so it holds for a really long time after I've cooked it, and it stays super moist and delicious. And that's it. I mix all this together, put it into my container, and it's really good. It's super filling. I mean, I don't know who wouldn't get full eating this entire bowl, plus, your protein on top. And it just allows you to eat a lot of food. I'm all about eating a lot of nutritious, delicious So I hope it wasn't too all over the place and there was something interesting in there. This was really long. I might chop it up into two, or just put it out there as an entire hour and you can watch it, start it, stop it. Shoot me any questions, and I'm going to try to do this at least once a week and give you lots more info. Have a great day.